Thank you, Mr. Betts. It is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and can I thank and commend the honourable gentleman, the member for Strangford, for bringing this debate to Westminster Hall. And it is a pleasure, indeed rather a humbling one, to listen to my friend, the honourable member for Henley, who is a true expert in relation to matters pertaining to Nigeria. And I certainly wouldn't want to deflect from, in my contribution, from anything that's already been said by those who've spoken. Much has already been said regarding the situation in Nigeria, especially in the so-called Middle Belt, which straddles the divide between the largely Muslim north and the majority Christian south, and which is also the scene of an escalating cycle of violence between settled farmers, who are mostly Christian, and the mainly Muslim Fulani herdsmen. The Fulani are an ethnic group of about 20 million people across 20 West and Central African countries. And exasperating factors are also the environmental impact of climate change and the proliferation of armaments, especially those that were looted from the arsenals of the former Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi, which are being smuggled across the region and being used to dreadful, horrible effect. The 2017 Global Terrorism Index estimates, as has already been cited, that more than 60,000 people have been killed across West Africa in clashes between Fulani herdsmen and settled communities since 2001. But the number of violent deaths in Nigeria is again spiralling upwards. The Armed Conflict and Evident Data Project estimates that armed Fulani gunmen have killed nearly 1,000 people so far this year, and that was a report in the summer. And that's more than Boko Haram. And the killings which take place in villages and small farming communities include the cold-blooded murder of women and children, and we have heard those accounts in this debate. The Nigerian government blames the violence on armed banditry and organised crime, but there are clear ethnic and religious issues at play. And the violence would seem to be based in economic insecurity, but the roots causes run deeper. The fact is the conflict is rooted in the complex religious history of the region going back to the Sokoto Caliphate in the 19th century and the missionaries who brought Christianity to the region at that time. And this long-standing conflict has been brutal and most inhumane. Who can forget the atrocities of Boko Haram, funded by the most horrific crimes of kidnapping, slavery, human trafficking, and rape? Only this year, in June, we saw 86 people killed and 56 homes destroyed by herders. But it is not all without hope, Mr. Betts. I read an interesting and indeed inspiring story of some Christians who were fleeing from the scene of an attack. The brutal raiders had descended upon them in their homes in the middle of the night, and they got away, many of them. They were running for their lives, and shelter came in the form of an imam of the local mosque, who took them in and gave them sanctuary and protected them within the walls of the mosque. And the family, in this instance of this story, survived. This is the paramount value of faith, that in the sight of such adversity and such violence, we can still see the humanity in each other. It is when we acknowledge our common humanity that we can truly achieve peace. And peace with each other is one thing, but also peace within ourselves, which is quite another transcendent value. It is also the truth that despite any claims to the contrary, the central truth of Islam, as with the message of the Christian gospel, is of love for one another and our common humanity. The situation in Nigeria is riven with mixed signals. The government claim the situation in the north is improving.
For giving way. When we had our recent trip, Mr. Betts, to Pakistan, one of the things that came out of that engagement was the three words which were used by those of Islamic faith, but also those of Christian faith, and it was love, tolerance, and respect. If we get those three things together, and we believe it, and we do it, and we act it out in our face, then society itself can move forward as well with respect for each other.
I'm grateful to the my honourable friend for his intervention. The Nigerian government does make claims about reduced violence. There has been a significant amount of UK aid spent in trying to help the Nigerian authorities to fight against insurgents. But the late Catholic bishop, Joseph Bagabiri, accused President Buhari's government of actually siding with the herdsmen. The quote that I refer to, Buhari, he said, has unashamedly taken sides with the armed herdsmen, his kinsmen, thereby failing in his responsibility as a true statesman. Now, that is quite an accusation. And such accusations or allegations of complicity between the Nigerian president and those who are perpetrating these acts of violence must be shown to be unfounded. There can't be any room for this kind of complicity if it exists at all. Beyond the issue of complicity is the issue of corruption. And so long as there is endemic corruption in Nigeria, there will be conflict. If government has no moral authority, then there is a vacuum into which extremism will step. The attacks are also taking place based on ethno-religious basis. And there's no doubt there's also economic and political aspects to them. In a country like Nigeria, with 90 million Muslims and 76 million Christians living together, understanding and tolerance are essential. The attacks will only dissipate when there is a sense of fairness, a sense of government with a moral authority, and a sense of a world community that stands alongside the decent people of Nigeria. So I've got some questions I'd just like to pose to the Minister, which are concurrent with other questions that have been asked in this debate. What is the UK government's assessment of the situation on the ground in northern Nigeria and in the Middle Belt? What is the Minister's assessment of the effectiveness of the part the UK is playing to strengthen internal security and to encourage cross-border cooperation to control both the movements of marauding terrorists and also the illicit trade in armaments? What is being done by the UK government to strengthen the local machinery that exists to support conflict resolution? And the point that was made by my honourable friend in relation to the activities of DFID, what are we doing to build sustainable solutions to the issues impacted by climate change, as was mentioned by my honourable friend, the member for Henley, in relation to the establishment of grazing reserves? These will be significant steps. Now, I wish to conclude, Mr Betts, by referring to words which I believe are haunting from the noble Lord Alton, who, speaking in another place earlier this year, quoted the Archbishop of Abuja, who described the escalating violence as territorial conquest and ethnic cleansing. And he said, quoting the Archbishop, Lord Alton, quoting the Archbishop, said, "The very survival of our nation is at stake. But Lord Alton then went on to say this: are we to watch one of Africa's greatest countries go the way of Sudan? Will we be indifferent to radical forces seeking to replace diversity and difference with a monochrome ideology that will impose with violence, imposed with violence on those who refuse to comply? We must not wait for a genocide to happen as it did in Rwanda. Ominously, history could very easily be repeated." End of quote. I repeat his warning today.